Men of War is perhaps the greatest World War II strategy franchise of all time. Okay, look, I may be slightly biased on this one, but saying it's the greatest in my opinion doesn't really annoy people the same way that it does saying it is a fact. Yes, I see you Company of Heroes fans jumping at your keyboard. Fine. Men of War is one of the best World War II strategy franchises of all time. But funnily enough, despite it being around for so long, with all the many spin-offs and experiments, we've never actually had a sequel. Yes, you heard me. A true sequel to Men of War. But that is all about to change because, oh boy, Men of War 2 is coming. But why haven't you heard about it yet? Let's go back to the beginning of when Men of War was just a name in the wind, a conception by some beautiful minds ready to conquer the tactical world of gaming. A title that went by Soldiers, Heroes of World War II. Released in 2004 by developer Bestway, the game was the first in what would be an incredibly long-lasting World War II strategy franchise. Forgetting some Eastern Europe-only releases, we later got Faces of War and some spin-offs that came with that. Despite the lack of the name, however, you can already see the seed of what would become Men of War in these early games. Perhaps way more than you maybe expected. Watching footage of these early games really made me come to some sort of sad realization how similar the first and now the latest games have been throughout time. You'd expect some massive overhauls, but they look so similar. From Soldiers, Heroes of War to Assault Squad 2, the games just don't look worlds apart, despite being the decade-long gap between them. Despite this, the series has actually had a number of different developers. Bestway, of course, starting the whole thing, creating the main line, as it were, Men of War games. Then you have 1C Company, who took over some of the publishing and development of some of the less successful spin-offs like Vietnam and Red Tide, and finally Digital Mindsoft, who have carried the torch in more recent years, being the masterminds behind the Assault Squad series and later the Call to Arms spin-offs. Yet in 2009 came the first game in the series that had the namesake, Men of War. Yes, that was over 12 years ago now, and we still haven't had a true sequel. Sounds mental, right? But it's true. As mentioned, Digital Mindsoft soon took over with the development on Assault Squad and Men of War Assault Squad 2, perhaps the two games that really blew Men of War up into a really mainstream position, especially on platforms like YouTube. Assault Squad 2 is where most people's heads go when they think of Men of War, adding some beautiful large-scale battles, and of course, that editor. This was when the game became incredibly prominent, with YouTubers like Diplex Heated, Raptor, and Daily Tactics, using the inclusion of mods to bring something new to the platform, whether it was a realistic recreation of famous battles, or a complete overhaul, clone troopers versus droids in a deadly ambush battle. The Men of War series had really taken off. Yet despite the success of the Assault Squad games, they were never really an actual sequel. Yes, okay, they used all the same base mechanics and advanced in some great ways, but in terms of the original developers coming back, using that old namesake, it wasn't quite the same. And this, my friends, is when Men of War 2 comes in. Men of War 2 came in a strange form in 2020. Yes, technically it's actually already released. Originally called Soldiers Arena, it was later renamed to Men of War 2 Arena, a free-to-play tactical World War II strategy. Yes, you heard me, it was free-to-play, and I think this part perhaps contributed to the downfall of this version of the game. The original developers came back Bestway, you know, the ones that started the whole series. They came with their own independently developed version of the well-used gem engine because they wanted to push the Men of War series in a new direction, free-to-play multiplayer. With little to no single-player aspects, it was all about the large open multiplayer tactical battles. The UI had somewhat of an overhaul. Graphically, it was very similar to Assault Squad 2, and all in all had a decent base platform that Men of War had built up over the years. But something went wrong. Whether it was the freemium nature of the game, maybe even having to grind through XP, which felt weird in a Men of War game, or even buy microtransactions to help progress. All in all, Men of War 2 Arena suffered. There must have been a massive issue with promotion of the game as well, because I'm sure it was nowhere near shouted about enough to get a real player base needed for a multiplayer focused strategy. The game was also intended to come to Steam soon after its initial launch, which never came into fruition, and it started to look very bleak for the comeback by the original developers. And then, just over a year after its release, on the 10th of August 2021, the developers announced the discontinuation of the game completely. They said, I quote, "Today we have a very important announcement for you. Following the feedback that we've received from the Men of War community, we decided to discontinue Arena." Sad, right? Well, it's the next line that interested me. The gave me that defibrillator shot to get me back in the world and excited again for Men of War. The devs came back saying that they've decided to cancel Men of War Arena 2 as a free-to-play game and release it later on as just Men of War 2. A full game, not free-to-play, but an actual refined new Men of War game, and judging by the namesake, a true sequel to the original Men of War by the original developers and bringing it back to life. And Best Way have stuck to their word. On the 30th of September 2021, the servers for Men of War 2 Arena were shut down. Yes, I know, very soon after the discontinuation announcement that was back in August. It perhaps makes me wonder how fast they were expecting to switch to this new direction for Men of War 2. So, what will Men of War 2 include? Well, they mentioned they're going to focus on the new sides of the conflicts, perhaps more in-depth looks at the lesser covered theatres of war. The African campaigns have been touched upon in previous Men of War games, yet I feel there needs to be a bit more focus on it, especially in a game like Assault Squad 2. There was a real lack of factions like Italy that would be really great to look into. Men of War 2, the upcoming sequel, will also have a full single-player campaign, which, to me at least, is a great relief. Whilst it has never been my love in the franchise, adding single-player back is, I think, necessary to make a game feel a premium, at least content-wise, and Men of War has the ability to cover some of these untold stories from World War II. And then the final cherry on top came with the announcement of full modding support. This is going to be in the next game and something that was constantly requested for Men of War 2 Arena, so I'm very glad the developers are listening on that one. And all of this looks incredibly promising for the future of the Men of War franchise. Whilst I think many people were against Arena as a concept, which is clear by the shutting down of their game completely, you can't really knock the devs for wanting to try something new, and then when it didn't work out, responding well to the feedback, and hopefully with this we can get a truly great successor and sequel to the ever-loved Men of War. So, when are we expected to get this second Men of War game? Well, as mentioned, we can speculate that it's not going to be so far in the future because, I mean, they quickly shut down the servers for Arena. Additionally, all the base of the game is there, they just take it from Arena and just adapting it to this new style to speed up development. Yet, at the end of the day, speculation isn't all that helpful, so I guess only time can tell. But let me know what you think. Do you think this is the time for a second Men of War game? Or are you, like me, waiting for something like an Assault Squad 3? Leave your comments down below. But leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Leave a dislike if you didn't. But until then, I will see you in the next one.